Today's talk is 14 tips for layout rebuilding. First, I'm going to talk about this as an opportunity, and this is really the most important tip of all, to view this as an opportunity to do something better, to do something new. There'll be tips specifically related to planning, mostly planning for a smaller space, but it doesn't have to be for a smaller space. You could be moving, if you're lucky enough, to be moving into a larger space. And likewise, you may be rebuilding in a larger space. So either way, I'll have tips for you. First tip I'm going to offer up to you is that smaller items are going to be easier to save. Whenever we rebuild something, there's always a very strong tendency to want to retain something or some things from our previous layout. And the smaller the item is, the more we can do that. Certainly rolling stock all moves forward into the new layout in many cases. But oftentimes there are buildings or bridges or parts of the layout, even whole sections of the layout that we want to bring forward. The smaller it is, the easier that's going to be possible for you. Tip number 2 is larger items rarely get reused or rarely get reused well. On the right-hand side of the screen, you can see a fairly complex throat that I laid out for a staging yard. I was very proud of this track. It took me a long time to get it to run well. And I thought there may be some way to reuse this, but really it only fits with that sectional layout. It's unlikely to be used in anything else. It's not to say that this never happens, but predominantly when there's larger and larger pieces that you're trying to save, it fits less and less in your new layout. Rebuilding is an opportunity to reuse though, and you should reuse what you can. Track is an obvious choice here, and if you're careful taking the track up, you can certainly reuse. This is the pile of track that came out of the sectional layout that I was taking apart. And then we used that track in our demonstration system. It's a double helix that we use at trade shows, and all of the track on it comes from a previous layout. So reuse what you can. When we're talking about track, there's also the cork roadbed, and typically that doesn't transfer well. It's usually glued down, it usually comes up in small pieces, and it can't easily be reused. So track, yes, cork, no. And this is true of many other things, trees that you've built, details, certainly they can all be brought forward. So definitely reuse what you can. Add things that were not in your previous layout. Those may be operational features, such as a loading track for some type of industry that you didn't have on your previous layout. Or it could be more capacity in the yard or staging at different points that didn't exist in your previous layout. You'll know what those things are, and it's a good idea to think about what are those things that I would like to add that I didn't have in my old layout. And by the same token, it's also a chance to say, this is in my old layout and I don't want to bring it forward. So I know people have had a lot of difficulty with magnetic uncouplers, for example, and those are the sorts of things that people really reconsider when they're rebuilding, not to include those under the ballast magnets or permanent magnets, and perhaps switching to electromagnets or eliminating them altogether. Rebuilding is an opportunity to change scales. Now, this is not me saying to you that you should change scales because you're rebuilding. Certainly, if you're moving into a small space, I would encourage you to think about moving to N scale or even Z scale. The space benefits of those smaller scales are simply undeniable, and hands down, they're the best way to utilize space as efficiently as possible. That said, there are plenty of folks that rebuild and go the opposite direction and build in a larger scale, whether it's HO, O, or even scales like G scale. But this is the time to think about it. It may be the opportunity that you haven't had previously to move into a different scale, to try what's there, or to make a permanent shift. Let's switch our focus a little bit to planning, and tip number 6 is to develop a good plan before dismantling your old layout. Now, this is really important because it allows you to understand what's going into your new layout or what you expect to go into your new layout. And that's very important for when you're thinking about what am I going to save. So develop your plan before dismantling your old layout. Is this going to be a single deck or a double deck layout? If you're in a spare bedroom and you're in N scale, you're definitely in luck. Adding a double deck layout or perhaps moving to a double deck layout is easily enabled by an N scale helix, which is typically only 3 or maybe 4 feet in diameter. It doesn't dominate the room. It still leaves plenty of space in that spare room for both decks of your layout. On the other hand, if you're operating in a larger scale, an HO helix is typically 6 feet or more in diameter, and it's very difficult to get a plan that works with a 6-foot diameter helix in a bedroom that's typically in the order of 10 feet by 12 feet. In the diagram on the screen, you can see proportionately how big the helix is to the rest of the layout, and that can work quite well. You can have your trains in staging below, and you can have a scenic area. Some people even go to 3 decks. All of that is possible within a smaller space, but it's definitely something to think about at the time that you're considering moving. What are the deck widths that you're going to use in your new layout? Reaching over to disconnect cars or to re-rail cars gets more and more difficult the deeper the deck is, and certainly in small rooms, the depth of the deck starts to take up more of the overall floor space. So the width and the height of the deck have a big bearing on managing cars on your layout, reaching over buildings and trees and so on, and just generally operating in an enjoyable manner. It also is going to determine how much track and where those tracks will be in your layout, but it's a good thing to decide that early on. Will you be crossing doorways as part of your new plan? Sometimes that's necessary. I had a layout space that had 4 doorways in it, and it was almost nothing but duck unders and doorways and gates and that sort of thing. And I didn't end up building that plan. It was too complicated. But it helped me understand that space really wasn't workable. And I'm glad I found that out on paper rather than trying to build it and learn it the hard way. What about operators? How many operators do you plan to have involved in your new layout? It may just be you, it may be you and maybe some friends, but it could be a larger crew, and you need to make sure there's space for them both in the layout and outside the layout room. What kind of bench work are you going to use? This has a big bearing on how long it will take you to rebuild. Will you need a workshop in order to build that bench work? There's a whole lot of factors that you can decide ahead of time before you start dismantling your old layout. And lastly, how long do you want to spend building it? We don't want to take 10 years to build our next layout. We want to build it quickly, maybe in a year or 2, and get operating and enjoy it with our friends and our fellow operators. Definitely things to take into account when you're designing your new layout. Tip number 7 is to prioritize access to wiring and track. None of us are getting any younger, and we're all getting more and more aches and pains as we get older. And we don't want to end up like my friend Chris here, who drew the short straw and is having to do some wiring underneath the layout. I don't know about you, but my knees aren't up for that kind of thing anymore. So as much as possible, we want to be designing our new layout such that it doesn't require us to get under to do that kind of work, to maintain or adjust a switch machine or add wiring for signaling, which is what we're doing. There are better ways to do that. I've already mentioned operators, but tip number 8 is very much about operators. Prioritize for your operators. We want it to be an enjoyable experience, and that means making sure that your operators can move freely and comfortably in and around the layout. In the photo, we can see a large basement layout owned by my friend Sheldon Frankel, and Sheldon did an absolutely fantastic job deciding where the operators would be during a session such that we really don't bump into each other. The aisles aren't that wide, but it doesn't really matter that much because we're not getting in each other's way by design. So put the switching areas separate from one another. such that operators don't need to be crowding in one another's area. This is particularly important for double deck layouts where it's going to be problematic if you have a switching area that is above another switching area. So take the time to think about the operators. You'll really appreciate it when it comes time to build and then operate your layout. Now we move on to the actual rebuilding. And tip number 9 may save a lot of heartburn for many of you. Get someone who doesn't care about your layout to help you. Now, I really like working on track and I spend a lot of time making it run well. So the idea of tearing up my track, whether we recover switches and diamond crossings and whatnot, is a traumatic experience. But my wife doesn't feel the same way. I just need to tell her which track needs to come up and she'll happily lift that track and she's able to take it up carefully so we can reuse the parts that we want to. But for me to tear it up is very, very difficult. And this may be true of scenery or buildings or any other aspect that you're concerned about. Get some folks involved who aren't emotionally tied to what it took to build that layout or build that part of that layout. On the right is a layout built by my friend Chris. This is his 3rd iteration. This is a lovely layout. It's about 10 feet long and about 4 feet wide, and it represents part of the Arizona main line on the BNSF. And Chris built multiple layouts depicting a similar area before this one. And you want to be thinking about where am I trying to get to. As his 3rd layout, it's significantly better than his 1st. And it wouldn't be as good as it is if he didn't have those original layouts and then rebuild them. The things that you learn in the prior layout is both what you want to do and what you can do, but also what you don't want to do and what you're not able to do. And, by the time you're getting to the 2nd and 3rd layout, it's going to be better because of that experience. So keep the end in mind. Yes, it's traumatic to be tearing up the old layout, but you're hopefully going to something that is a lot better and a lot more enjoyable than what you've had previously. And that's the part to focus on. It'll get you through the tough days of tearing things down. Rebuilding means building better, and that's where we come to with tip number 11, build modular. This is very, very important because every layout is going to get moved. Whether you move it or whether somebody else moves it, it's going to happen. Layouts are not going to stay where they are permanently. And the more we build them as monolithic single structures, the more difficult it's going to be to move them, and the more difficult it's going to be to preserve any of it in any meaningful way. Modular gives you a lot of control about how things can be worked on, how it can be constructed, but also how it can be moved. One of the greats in modular railroading was David Barrow. He was doing that way before everybody else got on the bandwagon. David Barrow built some amazing layouts, but they were all based on a module design that made it very, very easy to reconfigure that layout and to rebuild. And he's one of the greats. He brought some amazing things to the hobby, and it's very, very much a sensible way to go. Now, when you're building modules, you want to be able to build them in such a way that they're going to be very sturdy, very rigid, non-twisting, not racking, not changing their shape. Because the whole thing with a module is that you can build it and then you can have it operating in your layout, take it out and work on it, flip it over, get to the wiring, the switch machines, and then put it back knowing that it hasn't changed. The right angles are still right angles. Everything still lines up. This is very, very difficult to do with dimensional lumber and screws and regular wood glue. For that, you need really strong joints like you can see in the depressed center frame on the right-hand side. We use box joints in our modules. We add gussets to many of the joins between joists and girders for a super strong module that can go in and come out and not change its shape. And therefore it's going to fit and your track work is going to stay exactly where it is and everything's going to run beautifully. Build at your workbench is another big advantage of modular railroading. You don't need to be stooped over or hunched over your layout. It can be built in many cases at the kitchen table. You don't need a workshop. It's a very, very easy way to build. Small sections are easier to manipulate, so anything from 2 feet up to 5 feet long is a pretty good length. Those pieces can be moved around easily. If you need to put it down, there's usually a space where you can put them. When you start going to 6 feet, 8 feet, 10 feet, now it's hard to get through doorways or get around stairwells or get them into a vehicle to move them. So keep your sections relatively short. There's a lot of advantages to that. And this really helps you in the next instance where you'll be carrying and relocating your work to a new location. In terms of rebuilding better, we can take advantage of the new advances in various technologies that people leverage these days in model railroading. So tip number 12 is what's new since your last build. Certainly 3D printing has come a long way. The CNC routers that are available, still fairly expensive, but give you some options. And there's much better electronics available, so take advantage of some or all of those things. Tip number 13 is to leverage faster approaches, leverage kits. We don't want to spend forever building our layout. We want to get up and running quickly. And this is more and more important as you get older. Whereas we maybe once took several years, maybe 5 years or more to build a layout. Once you're, in your more advanced years, you don't want to do that. You want to get quickly to the point where you can operate, you can bring your friends over. And kit construction allows you to get there so much faster. On the left in the screen here, we've got a workshop area with typical dozens of clamps and power tools and air tools. And sure, maybe you know how to use those things, but it's just so much easier to take the parts for a kit, put those pieces together, and then you've got a next section of bench work that's strong and rigid and ready to go. It's just a much easier way to build. So wherever possible, leverage kits. You don't need special tools. You don't need a workshop, and it allows you to get to what you're trying to get to much faster. And the last tip about rebuilding and building better is to consider unconventional designs. We're all used to the standard shelf layout where it's rigidly fixed in place, or maybe, as we've been talking about, a modular setup where I can take one of those modules out and flip it over and work on it on my workbench. But there are also options for things like folding or tilt-up bench work, which allow you to leave the part in place but gain access by tilting it up and then working on it and then tilting it back down. Or in the case of a folding layout, and that's what's depicted here as the bench work for a folding layout, this is a prototype for one of the future products that we're working on here. And when it's unfolded, it's a large sort of tabletop layout in the order of 6 to 7 feet long and about 3.5 feet wide. Certainly fine for a very nice N-scale layout. Also, HO layouts will fit on there quite comfortably as well. And then when you're done, it can be all folded up as in the left-hand picture. It could even be stood on its end out of the way if space is an issue for you. There are others as well. Sections of layout that can be raised up over a doorway when it's not in use. So there are a lot of solutions out there that just simply weren't really viable 10, 15 years ago. So look around for those solutions. They can certainly enable layout plans that maybe weren't viable in the past when you've looked. Storage is always an issue, and if your layout is in a temporary setup where it needs to be moved away, being able to fold it into a more compact size is very beneficial for storage. Overall, rebuilding is an opportunity. It's your chance to take what you've done, take what you've known, and build it better, and build it in a way that includes things that you couldn't include previously. So those are the 14 tips that I'd like to share with you. Hopefully one or more of them will help you when you're at the point to rebuild. If you have questions about any of the things that we've talked about in this presentation, or if you're interested in any of our products that I've mentioned along the way, please reach out to me. My name's Stephen Cox. I'm the head of product design at Precision Model Railroad, and you can reach me at info@precisionmodelrailroad.com. Thanks so much, and we look forward to talking with you.